Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Okay, happy Thursday everybody. After several days of unofficial reports, it is now confirmed that Secretary of State Blinken will be travelling to Beijing this weekend in the first visit from a US Secretary of State since the Trump administration. We remember that earlier this year, Blinken cancelled his original trip plans to China due to fallout from the Chinese balloon saga. Both sides confirmed the visit after a phone call between Blinken and PRC Foreign Minister Qin Gang. The readout of the call, especially from the PRC side, was not particularly warm, with the PRC readout containing the line, quote, "China-US relations have encountered new difficulties and challenges for which it is crystal clear who is responsible," end quote. Adding, quote, "The United States should respect China's position on the Taiwan question, stop interfering in China's internal affairs, and stop undermining China's sovereignty, security, and development interests in the name of competition," end quote. The attitude of state media wasn't too different, with state-run Global Times writing today, quote, "Blinken's visit has been delayed for a long period as the Biden administration first focused on unifying its allies and taking a Cold War stance against China," end quote. On the US side, speaking to reporters yesterday, Deputy Assistant to the President and Coordinator for Indo-Pacific Affairs, Kurt Campbell, said, quote, "We're clear-eyed about the PRC. We know efforts to shape or reform China over several decades have failed. Intense competition requires intense diplomacy, and we're going to manage tensions. As the competition continues, the PRC will take provocative steps from the Taiwan Strait to Cuba, and we will push back," end quote. Thus, we should see this upcoming trip over the weekend as part of bilateral efforts to establish guardrails in the relationship rather than any sign of improvement in relations. That is to say, expectations for the visit should be low. Both sides very much see each other as adversaries. The United States Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, Kittenbrick, who recently himself completed a trip to Beijing, provided more details regarding the specifics and aims of the Blinken trip, telling reporters yesterday, quote, "We have 3 objectives. We want to make sure that we keep our senior-level communication channels open to reduce the risk of miscalculation. We want to have an opportunity to signal our interests and our views, stand up and speak out for our values and interests. And thirdly, we do want to explore areas of potential cooperation where it's in our interest to do so," end quote. Adding, quote, "I think this is a really critical series of engagements that we'll have in Beijing at a critical time in the relationship, and we again hope will, at a minimum, reduce the risk of miscalculation so that we do not veer into potential conflict. I think things are incredibly serious right now," end quote. As a quick side note on US-China matters, following in the recent footsteps of Elon Musk, US billionaire Bill Gates is in China this week, and unconfirmed reports suggest that the Microsoft co-founder will meet with Xi Jinping himself on Friday, tomorrow. If accurate, it would be the General Secretary's first meeting with a foreign private entrepreneur in years. Next up, in what is fast becoming an international scandal, the, until very recently, head of communications at the Beijing-based Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, a Canadian, Bob Pickard, flew to Tokyo yesterday, where he announced his resignation from the World Bank-like institution because it was, quote, "infiltrated by the Communist Party," end quote, expressing, quote, "These people are like an invisible government inside the bank, and this is what I can't be part of. I don't want to be a useful idiot," end quote. The Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank is a multilateral development bank that, according to its mission statement, aims to improve economic and social outcomes in Asia. It is the world's second largest multilateral development institution and is seen as a potential rival to the World Bank and IMF. In theory, the bank's governance structure is headed by a board of governors, composed of one governor from each member state of the bank, which meets once a year. The executive head, which is in charge of the day-to-day governance, is the board of directors, composed of 12 governors, all from different countries, while the president of the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank is a PRC national who has, in previous statements, expressed publicly his pride to be a party member and a Chinese nationalist. The 5 VPs are from around the world, including one from Germany and another from the UK. The chief risk officer is French, the chief economist is Swedish, and the chief finance officer, who, full disclosure, I've met on several occasions, including over dinner in Beijing, is from New Zealand. Indeed, the institution has gone to great lengths to hold itself out as a relatively international and independent body which follows global best practices. While China is the largest shareholder, with 26.6% voting rights, the bank's 106 members include many Western countries and enjoys a AAA credit rating, which allows it to raise capital at very low costs. This is why Picard's accusations have blown up into an international scandal. In one tweet, the former communications leader expressed, quote, "The bank is dominated by Communist Party members and also has one of the most toxic cultures imaginable," end quote, alleging that party members, quote, "operate like an internal secret police," end quote, and adding, quote, "The Communist Party hacks hold the cards. They deal with some board members as useful idiots. I believe that my government should not be a member of this PRC instrument," end quote. And indeed, very soon after the tweets, the Canadian government announced that it was freezing all activity with the bank and launching a review of its membership to the bank. The speed in which Ottawa responded has led some to speculate that Picard may have communicated to his government in advance of the statements, though it could also simply be that the Canadian government, which, as we have explored, is already dealing with its own China-related scandals, is sensitive to these sort of things and as such was quick to respond to the story. In an official statement soon after the tweets, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank expressed, quote, "AIIB has accepted the resignation of Mr. Bob Picard. Mr. Picard's recent public comments and characterization of the bank are baseless and disappointing. We are proud of our multilateral mission and have a diverse international team representing 65 different nationalities and members of AIIB, serving our 106 members worldwide, many of whom have been with us since our formation," end quote. UK-based Financial Times writes today, quote, "An Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank insider said the allegations did not correspond with what he has seen working at the bank for a number of years, and that they were unfortunate characterizations," end quote. But with all of this blowing up, more seasoned China analysts seem to be a little taken aback by everything, with some pointing out the obvious. Quote, "Is there something else going on that has not yet been made public? Because the bank being dominated by Communist Party members should not be a surprise," end quote. Next up, we have one more story to cover. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit that like button. It's just me making these episodes every day. It's a lot of work, but your guys' support is a huge source of motivation. Subscribing and sharing is a huge help as well, and for those who can go the extra mile and help me keep the channel financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Okay, finally for today's video, Germany has finally published its long-awaited and first ever national security strategy, which, among other things, officially designates China as a systemic rival. Berlin's toughest language to date. Quote, "We are living in an age of increasing multipolarity. Some countries are attempting to reshape the current international order, driven by their perception of systemic rivalry. In this international context, China is a partner, competitor, and systemic rival. We see that the elements of rivalry and competition have increased in recent years. But at the same time, China remains a partner without whom many of the most pressing global challenges cannot be resolved," end quote, adding that China is, quote, "acting time and again counter to our interests and values," end quote, and, quote, "they view human rights, civil liberties, and democratic participation as a threat to their power," End quote. As we can see, the wording of the statement does seem somewhat schizophrenic at times, though as a whole it is clear that this is tougher and very different to the more conciliatory position and approach championed by French leader Macron. The policy's release comes ahead of a new China-specific strategy that is expected to be issued next month, and on the eve of government-to-government consultations to be held between China and Germany in Berlin next week. Next week, too, the EU will launch its own economic security strategy related to China. Speaking at a press event after the publication of the document, Germany's foreign minister, who herself recently had a visit to Beijing, expressed that German businesses had been warned that they would not be bailed out in the event of a large-scale crisis with China. In China, state media turned to its familiar playbook to explain the German move. Quote, although the document contains some strong worded rhetoric against China, it also advocates cooperation, which indicates that China-Germany relations still have room to develop. Berlin is trying to put aside ideological differences and try not to provoke China, its largest trading partner, as well as making efforts to preserve its autonomy as a major country on the European continent, despite pressure from the US to force allies to contain China. End quote. The debate within European capitals regarding how it should view China going forward continues, but the trend does increasingly appear to be an approach and policy much more adversarial in nature. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a wonderful Thursday, and I will see you all tomorrow.